Welcome to another deep dive. You ready to explore the world of habits?
Definitely. It's a topic that fascinates me.
Me too, especially with the insights we've got from this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah, it's packed with great stuff. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it makes sense to start with the author himself, James Clear's own story.
Oh yeah, he's got quite the journey, right?
Definitely. Imagine going through a severe injury like that in high school, facial fractures and vision problems.
Then to become an academic All-American.
Exactly. It really highlights the power of those small changes, those tiny gains he talks about.
He didn't transform overnight. It was all about consistency.
It's like that analogy he uses in the book, the one about a plane taking off. A tiny shift in direction at the start.
And it can lead to a completely different destination, thousands of miles away.
Makes you think, doesn't it? If a small change in a plane's trajectory can have such a dramatic impact.
Yeah, what could small, consistent changes do for our lives? It's a great question to consider.
And it's not just about those positive changes either.
Right. Small negative habits can snowball too.
Exactly. It makes you stop and think, are there tiny habits in our lives that might be holding us back without us even realizing it?
It's worth reflecting on for sure.
Absolutely. And it leads us to the core of how habits form in the first place, right? Clear breaks it down into this 4-stage cycle: cue, craving, response, and reward.
Makes you see habits in a whole new light.
It really does. Think about it, the simple act of checking your phone first thing in the morning.
Oh yeah, we've all been there.
The notification light, that's your cue.
Then the craving kicks in, the need to know what's going on.
And the response, reaching for your phone, unlocking it.
And the reward, feeling connected, up to date, all that.
Right, but the cool part is, once you understand this cycle, you can actually change it.
Like reprogramming yourself almost.
Exactly. Let's say you want to start your day with a mindful moment instead of immediately checking your phone.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, what if instead of having your phone on your nightstand, you replaced it with a book or a journal?
I see. So the first thing you see when you wake up is a cue for reading or reflection instead of a cue for checking your phone.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the cues and cravings that drive our habits.
That makes sense.
And to help us become more aware of those unconscious habits, Clear introduces this exercise called the Habits Scorecard.
The what?
The Habits Scorecard. Basically, you just list out your daily habits, good and bad.
To become more conscious of what you're doing on autopilot.
Exactly. It reminded me of this system used by Japanese railway conductors called point and call.
Point and call.
Yeah. They actually point at and call out signals and track changes. Seems a bit much, but...
But it brings those actions from the unconscious to the conscious level.
Exactly. Reduces errors, improves safety. Could the Habits Scorecard do something similar for us?
Makes sense. Because once you're aware of your habits, you can start to change them.
Right. It's like, how many times have we mindlessly scrolled through social media or snacked without even realizing it?
All the time.
The Habits Scorecard helps us shine a spotlight on those automatic behaviors.
Those invisible scripts running in the background of our lives.
Okay, so we've got this powerful cycle of cue, craving, response, and reward. We've got the Habits Scorecard for awareness, but it's not just about our internal processes, right?
Right. Our environment plays a huge role too.
Absolutely. Clear talks about Lewin's equation.
Which says?
It says our behavior is a function of both the person and their environment.
So it's not just about willpower.
Not entirely. Our surroundings constantly shape our actions, which is actually good news.
How so?
Because it means we have more control than we might think. By changing our environment, we can directly influence our behavior.
I like the sound of that.
Right. Think about those tempting snacks we always keep on the counter.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
What if we just move them to a less visible spot? Or replace them with a bowl of fruit?
Make the cues for good habits obvious and the cues for bad habits invisible.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the physical space, right? Think about our digital environment, too.
Our phones and computers.
Yep. What apps are we constantly checking? What notifications are always vying for our attention?
That's a good point.
Are those notifications pulling us away from what we truly want to be doing? Maybe it's time to declutter that digital space.
Create a more intentional online environment.
Exactly. And not just about decluttering, but proactively designing our environment to support our desired habits.
Give me an example.
Okay, let's say you want to read more. How about placing a book on your bedside table instead of your phone?
Oh, I like that. Or if you want to drink more water, keep a full water bottle on your desk.
Exactly. It's about setting ourselves up for success by making the right choices the easy choices, But there's another layer to this whole environment thing, isn't there?
What's that?
It's not just our environment, but also the influence of the people around us.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. We're social creatures after all.
Right. We are incredibly influenced by those around us.
So true.
Clear talks about 3 categories of influence: the close, the many, and the powerful.
Miri.
The close being our family and friends, the many, the larger culture or tribe we belong to, and the powerful, those individuals with status and prestige.
Ah, okay, I get it. It's
Yeah.
like we see these people we admire doing certain things, achieving certain things.
And we naturally want to be like them.
It's almost a subconscious blueprint for our own behavior.
And it's not just about who we actively choose to surround ourselves with, right? It's also about the more subtle influences.
Like what?
Like advertising messages we're bombarded with daily, or societal norms that shape our expectations.
Ah, those sneaky little influences.
Yeah.
Operating below our conscious awareness.
It makes you wonder how much of our behavior is truly our own and how much is shaped by these external forces.
That's a deep thought.
But on the flip side, this also presents an opportunity, doesn't it, if we're susceptible to these influences?
We can be intentional about choosing the right ones.
Exactly. Surround yourself with people who embody the habits you want to cultivate.
Find your tribe, those communities where your desired behaviors are already the norm.
Like, if all your friends are health conscious,
You're more likely to adopt healthy habits yourself.
or if everyone in your circle is constantly learning and growing.
It inspires you to do the same.
It's almost like you're tapping into this collective energy of the group, benefiting from their wisdom and experience.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
But I guess the question is, does relying too heavily on social influence make us susceptible to, like, peer pressure?
Oh, that's a good point. How can we make sure we're not just blindly following the crowd?
Right. It's a balance, isn't it?
Definitely. Self-awareness is key.
So we've got the power of our environment, both physical and digital, shaping our habits. We've got the influence of the people around us guiding our actions. But there's another piece to this puzzle, isn't there?
Which is?
The role of our own identity, our sense of self. How does that play into this whole equation of habit change?
Oh, that's a big one. It's about more than just doing certain things. It's about becoming a certain kind of person.
Okay, so if you want to change your habits, you need to change your beliefs about who you are.
Exactly. Like instead of forcing yourself to go to the gym, it's about seeing yourself as someone who prioritizes health and fitness.
So then working out isn't a chore, it's just part of who you are.
Right. If you identify as a healthy person, working out is a natural extension of that.
It's like if you see yourself as a writer
The act of writing becomes less of a struggle.
and more a part of your being,
Exactly.
it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
It is. Your habits shape your identity.
And then your identity shapes your habits.
Right.
But how do you actually make that shift in identity? It's easy to say, I'm a healthy person.
Sure.
But actually living that out day after day, that's the tough part.
That's where the real work comes in. You have to align your actions with your desired identity.
So you're basically proving to yourself day after day that you are that kind of person.
Exactly. It's about those small wins, those consistent actions that reinforce your new self-image.
So no overnight overhauls. It's about those small incremental steps.
Exactly.
Those tiny changes that accumulate into a big transformation.
Think of it like building a house brick by brick.
Each brick might seem insignificant on its own.
But together they form the foundation.
And the same goes for building a new identity.
Each action, each choice,
It's like laying another brick.
reinforcing your commitment to becoming that person.
And this brings us back to the power of compounding, doesn't it?
It all connects. It's not about drastic changes. It's about consistently making those small choices.
That over time lead to big results.
It's about shifting your focus from the outcome to the process
Finding satisfaction in the journey.
and the daily pursuit of becoming your best self.
I love that. It's not just about the destination.
It's about embracing the journey.
But let's be honest, it's not always easy, is it? Some days that motivation just disappears.
It happens to all of us.
Those old habits come knocking. It's just easier to slip back into old patterns.
Sure.
How do we stay committed when it gets tough? Keep that fire burning even when we don't feel like it.
That's where discipline comes in.
Discipline. I feel like that word gets a bad rap.
I know it sounds strict and rigid,
Yeah.
but I actually see discipline as a form of self-love.
Self-love.
Yeah. It's about showing up for yourself,
Yeah.
even when you don't feel like it.
Honoring those commitments, even when it's challenging.
Exactly. Because those are the moments that define us.
It's about making choices that align with your values.
Even when those choices are hard.
Right. acting in accordance with your long-term goals.
Even when you're tempted by the short-term stuff.
Having the courage to say no.
Even when everyone else is saying yes.
This reminds me of something Clear talks about, the 2-minute rule.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Starting a new habit as frictionless as possible.
Right. Instead of run a marathon, it's put on my running shoes.
Exactly. What do you think about that approach?
It's a brilliant strategy. It eliminates that initial resistance.
That inertia that keeps us from taking action.
Exactly.
Is shifting your mindset from I have to I can.
From feeling overwhelmed to feeling empowered.
And it's not about tricking yourself.
No.
It's about acknowledging that starting is the hardest part.
Once you take that first step, the momentum often carries you forward.
Like when you finally sit down to write after procrastinating for hours.
Yes.
Those first few words are down on paper.
And the resistance just melts away.
The ideas start flowing.
That sense of flow, that's something to cultivate.
Speaking of flow, Clear also talks about the Goldilocks rule.
The what?
The Goldilocks rule. The idea that we're most engaged when a task is challenging enough to keep us interested.
But not so difficult that it becomes overwhelming.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where we're stretching ourselves without feeling defeated.
That's the key.
But how do you know when you've found that sweet spot? Seems like a delicate balance.
It's about being attuned to yourself. Noticing when you're feeling bored or disengaged.
Or overwhelmed and frustrated.
Right. Having the self-awareness to adjust the challenge level accordingly.
So it's a dance between pushing ourselves and pacing ourselves.
Finding that rhythm that works for you.
The rhythm of challenge and growth. But what happens as we get better at something?
As it becomes more routine.
Right. Doesn't it also become less exciting? How do you stay motivated when the novelty wears off?
That's a great question. It's about reframing your perspective.
Okay, how do you do that?
Find new ways to appreciate the process, even when it's not glamorous.
So not just focusing on the end goal.
Right. Focus on the intrinsic rewards of mastery, the satisfaction of seeing yourself improve.
The joy of becoming more skilled and competent.
Exactly.
It's about falling in love with the journey.
Not just the destination.
But being realistic, there are going to be days when even the most dedicated among us struggle.
We all have those days.
What are some strategies for those moments when our willpower just falters?
One powerful technique is temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling.
It's pairing an activity you want to do with one you need to do.
Okay, I'm listening.
Like, let's say you love listening to podcasts,
Which I do.
but you struggle to find time for exercise.
Also me.
Try listening to your favorite podcast only while you're working out.
Oh, that's clever. You're linking something pleasurable with something less desirable.
Exactly. It makes you more likely to stick to the habit.
It's like giving yourself a little reward for doing the things you know are good for you. And speaking of rewards, Clear also talks about habit tracking.
Oh, yes. Habit tracking is huge.
Creating a visual representation of your progress.
Whether it's marking off days on a calendar or using an app,
It's incredibly powerful.
it gives you a sense of accomplishment, a tangible record of your efforts.
And it taps into our brain's reward system. Seeing those streaks build up can be so motivating.
It's like a game.
It's about making the invisible visible, giving yourself credit for the progress you're making.
Even when those changes seem small.
Exactly. And it helps you identify patterns in your behavior too, right?
Absolutely. Like, are there certain days of the week when you're more likely to skip your workout?
Or specific triggers that lead you to indulge in those unhealthy snacks.
Right. By tracking your habits, you gain these valuable insights into your own behavior.
And then you can make more informed choices.
It's about shining a light on those unconscious patterns, bringing them into your awareness.
Where you can start to change them. But what about those bad habits that seem to have a life of their own?
The ones that keep coming back, no matter how hard we try.
Exactly. Those ingrained patterns, how do we break free from those?
It's not really about brute force willpower. It's more about outsmarting those habits.
We've touched on some ideas already, like habit contracts or accountability partners.
Right.
But you also mentioned technology as a tool. How can we use that to break bad habits?
Well, think about how seamlessly technology already fits into our lives. You can use that to your advantage.
Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you want to cut back on mindless social media scrolling.
Been there.
You can use website blockers, or if you're trying to save money,
Always try to do that.
Automate transfers to a savings account?
Oh, I see what you mean. Take away the temptation.
Exactly. Technology can remove those points of friction that make bad habits so easy,
Makes those unwanted behaviors much harder to do.
without having to rely on willpower alone.
Clear uses a really cool historical example in the book, The Invention of the Cash Register.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Back in the 1800s, employee theft was a big problem for businesses.
It was.
No way to really track transactions. Employees could just pocket money without getting caught.
Wow. It's hard to imagine that now.
Right, and then along comes James Ritty and invents the first cash register.
Problem solved.
Right, it automatically locked the cash and receipts inside after each transaction.
So simple, but so effective.
Employee theft basically vanished overnight.
Amazing how a simple change can have such a big impact.
It shows how we can break bad habits by making them impractical to do.
Change the system, not the person.
Right. And this brings us to another important piece of the puzzle: satisfaction.
Oh, yeah, that feeling of reward.
We're more likely to repeat behaviors that are enjoyable, that give us some kind of payoff.
Makes sense.
But it doesn't always have to be those external rewards, like a promotion or winning something.
Right. They're internal rewards, too.
That feeling of accomplishment, making progress towards a goal, becoming the best version of yourself.
Exactly. And Atomic Habits has this really interesting study that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, tell me about it.
Okay, so it focuses on hand-washing habits in Pakistan, where diarrhea was a serious health issue.
Okay.
Researchers tried everything to encourage hand-washing.
Like what?
Educational campaigns, free soap. But nothing seemed to work.
So what did they do?
They teamed up with Procter & Gamble to provide Safeguard soap to the community.
Safeguard.
It was considered a premium soap in Pakistan. So using it was a more pleasurable experience.
I see. Compared to the regular bar of soap.
And guess what? The rates of diarrhea went way down.
That's awesome. But did the habit stick?
That's the amazing part. Years later, even after the free soap was gone, the hand-washing habit persisted.
Because it had become associated with a positive experience.
Exactly. It wasn't just about hygiene anymore. It was about the enjoyment of using that luxurious soap.
So powerful. Making good habits enjoyable.
Finding those internal rewards.
That's the key to making them last.
It is.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into atomic habits. Any final takeaways for our listener before we wrap up?
Well, we covered a lot. The 4 stages of habit formation, the power of environment and social influence.
Those practical strategies like the 2-minute rule, temptation bundling, habit tracking.
So many great tools. But remember, it all starts with identity.
Becoming the type of person who embodies those desired habits.
It's not about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about aligning your actions with who you want to be.
And it's a journey, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A continuous process of improvement.
There will be setbacks. We all have those.
The key is to be patient with yourself. Learn from those experiences and keep moving forward.
Great advice. Atomic Habits shows us that we have the power to change. We're not stuck with our current habits.
We can reshape our lives, one small action at a time.
And those small actions, those atomic habits, compounded over time, lead to incredible results.
They really do. So as you go about your day, think about the habits you want to cultivate, the person you want to become.
And start taking those tiny steps.
Those atomic actions that will move you in the direction of your dreams.
Love it. Remember to keep sending us those source materials you want us to explore, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.